To be a modern socialist country in 2049, prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and beautiful, an ambitious goal set by the Communist Party of China. What is the essence of this goal? What does each term foreshadow? What impact will it all have on the world? Institutions, development models, multiple risks. What are the long-term challenges? And what about unexpected events or sudden problems? How to deal with uncertainty, especially over 3 decades? There are no easy answers, but the questions are vital. Watch our special series on Closer to China, China 2049, Opportunities and Challenges. What will China look like at mid-century, the year 2049, the 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic? President Xi Jinping states that the Chinese dream is the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, and the target date is 2049, when China intends to become a fully modernized socialist country, a country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and beautiful. What do these terms actually mean? What are the critical challenges, domestic, international? For example, will China overtake the U.S. and become the world's largest economy? Or will China get old before it gets rich? How important is state-owned enterprise, SOE reform? What kinds of structural or institutional reforms are needed, economic, political? How would China 2049 differ from China 2020? And the big question asked globally, how will China at mid-century impact other countries? To forecast China 2049 is to be closer to China. Sometimes one must view the long term through the limited lens of the short term. What is now officially called novel coronavirus pneumonia, NCP, has transfixed China. On January 23rd, Wuhan, a city of 11 million people, the epicenter of the epidemic, was locked down to prevent the contagion from spreading. 2 special hospitals were built in less than 2 weeks, staffed by medical teams from across the country, including PLA military medical personnel. China's mobilization to fight the virus is unprecedented in global health history.
I always say, sometimes China is a crisis-driven society. No crisis, no progress.
There's more. On February 8th, a special team sent by China's National Supervisory Commission arrived in Wuhan. Its purpose, responding to public uproar, is to investigate the circumstances surrounding the deceased Dr. Li Wenliang. Li was one of the first to raise an early alarm over the novel coronavirus, and he was reprimanded wrongly for doing so. China's National Supervisory Commission was formed in March 2018. It is the main organ tasked with combating corruption and malfeasance in China. Professor Zhong Yonglian, a Chinese political scientist at the National University of Singapore, says that China's supervision system has a long history. Let's talk about one of your favorite subjects, China 2049. What are the kinds of institutional or political structures would be optimized at that time?
I would like to talk about the 3 powers, division, labor, and the corporation.
Mm-hmm.
In the West, of course, we have checks and balance among 3 powers, right? You have legislature, you have executive, you have judicial. But don't forget that China also has a 3-power system: decision-making, executive, and the supervision. The system was set up at the Han Dynasty. Also lasted for more than 2,000 years until the Republic Revolution. I always say, don't underestimate the survivability or longevity of this system. Of course, it's not just simply brought back. It's a new, very innovative, very innovative. So I would say those 3 powers, well, basically, of course, there are lots of room for improvement. So those three-power system now the system is in place, will sustain for a long period of time.
The three divisions that China has is a very interesting one, but at the top of each of them is the party system. So at the very top, you don't have the checks and balances.
I categorize the Western system as external pluralism. You have a ruling party, you have opposition parties, many organization parties, right? China, I would say, always internal pluralism. One system, but it's open. All kinds of social forces you can get in the system. You compete for power within the system. That's why China called consultation, right? A lot of consultation, a lot of negotiation. If the party, the CCP, wants to survive or to develop intra-party democracy, is very important. Because if you look at the economic side or social side, China is already pluralism.
Yes. Sure.
How can one party accommodate so many interests? Well, you must be open, right? If you don't want opposition to grow, then your party will have to be very open.
A race against time. The Wuhan Electric Power Company, under state grid, is responsible for energy security in Wuhan. In the campaign against the novel coronavirus, their top priority is to ensure stable electricity supplies to hospitals. Besides electricity, medical supplies are also crucial. Running on full steam, this privately owned medical products company has provided half of Hubei province's protective suits.
I worry about the outbreak, but I feel much better doing what I can to help.
In this people's war against the virus, the private sector and state-owned enterprises play their respective roles. Professor Zheng traces China's history, arguing that healthy economic and social development depends on both of them.
Chinese economic system in the West was defined as state capitalism.
Yes.
But certainly it's not true. So amazingly, I found, I go back to Chinese history, I found really it's very, very interesting. From Han Dynasty until today, China always has three layers of capital. On the top, state capital. On the bottom, represented by SMEs, small and medium enterprise.
Right. Private capital.
Purely private capital. Then you have a middle ground when the state meets the private sector. The three levels of capital, always. The state capital has a specific function or responsibility. For example, the state should bear responsibility about long-term, large infrastructure building. The state has to deal with different kind of economic crisis. The state has to play a role when market fails. Market fails, right? This kind of thing. Then the private capital, of course, very innovative. You can do all kinds of things. The middle ground, the interact, cooperation. So very, very efficient system. So that's a political economy system. Whatever pressure from U.S., from West, China will never give up for the state sector, right? Because the state sector has survived for more than 2,000 years. But to maintain a state sector doesn't mean, you don't have a market. Market, of course, plays a very important role. So in Chinese case, both the state and the market play their own role. That's why, that also can explain China's rapid economic development. Because in the West, there's neoliberalism. You only have a market force to move economy forward. In China, both the state and the market, two actors move the economy forward. That's why you have so rapid economic development here.
I think in many cases the differences are exaggerated because in the U.S. we have the state playing some important roles, like the National Institute of Health. I don't know, the budget is $30 billion to support research, most of it's basic research, but that's how a lot of the new companies get started, is derivative from grants that come from the National Institute of Health over time. Over the last 40-plus years of China's reform and opening up, state-owned enterprise, SOE reform, has been a focal point. David Dollar, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, thinks that the key issue for SOE reform is to identify SOE's strengths.
So I think you've got some state enterprises that are in, classic monopoly sectors, utilities, for example, where we see this all around the world. There are a lot of examples of state enterprises, and they can be made to work effectively. What you don't see so much is state enterprises in ordinary commercial sectors. For example, in financial services, most of the big financial companies in China are state-owned, and that's an area where I think opening up more space for the private sector would lead to more competition, more efficiency. The general issue is China really needs to clarify what the role of state enterprises is, and in my view, narrow that down to some key monopoly sectors or areas where the particular social issue of you want the government to be providing services like education, and then get the government out of a lot of the commercial activity, which is going to be more effectively done by the private sector.
Yao Yang, Dean and Professor at the National School of Development at Peking University, explores SOE reform from the financial perspective. As this period goes on, what are the signs that you would look to say things are not on track, that need to be moved back on track?
Right. I think another challenge is how to make a financial system more efficient. China's financial sector development has lagged behind economic growth. Right? It's inadequate to support faster economic growth. In the next 30 years, innovation will be the main theme of economic growth in China. But our financial system is inadequate to support that kind of innovation. And together with that, we have to reform our state-owned state-owned enterprises, SOEs, okay? Because they take a huge chunk of financial resources, but their contribution to the economy, to innovation, is much smaller than their share of financial resources. That's a very hard challenge for China to deal with.
What is the optimum structure for SOE and SOE reform in order to achieve the China 2049 goal?
I think the best approach is competitive neutrality. Competitive neutrality means, yes, we can have SOEs, and many countries have SOEs. Right? European countries all have SOEs. But OECD has adopted this competitive neutrality as the principle to deal with SOEs. This means when you have government policy, then you have to treat SOEs as equally as non-SOEs. Okay, so there shouldn't be any difference between SOEs and the non-SOEs.
China says that that's what it's doing now. So that's the claim.
Right. But the problem is that we still have many institutions, for example, the financial institutions, that implicitly favor SOE. So that's why the challenge is immense, right? Because there are some rationales for big banks to favor SOEs, because SOEs never fail. Okay. Right? So in order to achieve competitive neutrality, we have to allow SOEs to fail. Right? So that's our challenge.
As the year 2020 begins, a black swan, the unexpected novel coronavirus pneumonia, hovers over China. As a result, some economists forecast that China's GDP growth may slow to around 5.5% this year. Though China's economy is under pressure due to the epidemic, starting February 14th, China halved rates of additional tariffs on some U.S. products, including automotive goods and agricultural products. Despite domestic difficulties, China fulfills its commitment made in the Sino-U.S. Phase 1 trade deal signed in January. Besides trade, the Sino-U.S. deal also involves financial services, technology transfer, and especially intellectual property rights. For China to achieve its overarching economic goal for China 2049, what are the top 3 domestic challenges or impediments?
Right, so it's easy to say China needs to become a more innovative economy, and we definitely see some of this happening already. China's spending quite a bit of money on research and development. It's moving ahead in some areas, but it's not really getting that much bang for its buck from research and development. So normally we would advocate strengthening intellectual property rights. Most innovation takes place from a small group of scientists and technical people who have the background and the inclination to do this innovative work. Intellectual property rights protection means that if they invent something really, really valuable, that they get quite a bit of the benefit from that. And so that's the foundation of the market economy.
Why should China further open up under current international pressures?
Right, so I think it's in China's interest to open up unilaterally. And I can understand that China would not be happy about opening up under pressure, but as the second biggest economy in the world and the biggest trading nation, I think it's time for China to open up completely on the trade side and with terms of direct investment. And that's one of the things that ensures that China's progress benefits other countries. Economics is mostly win-win. So if China becomes more innovative, it's going to be creating things that benefit the whole world, but it also has to be more open. So if the Europeans invent something very valuable, those European firms should be able to benefit from that in the Chinese market. You've really got 3, 4 big players in the world now with China, the U.S., the European Union, if you count them as a group, and Japan. These 4 make up most of the world economy, most of the innovation. If we can all build an open system where each of our firms can operate in the other system fairly, that's going to be a good basis for prosperity. It's also going to be a good basis for peace.
Professor Yao Yang agrees that the significance of China-U.S. trade negotiations goes beyond bilateral ties.
Then the second phase of the U.S.-China trade negotiations is not going to about trade. It's going to about rules, right? I think that China can take this opportunity to work with the United States to produce some rules, although those rules are going to be bilateral. But they're going to provide a template for WTO reform in the future. Right? So if those 2 countries can work together toward that goal, I think we are going to have a new world trade system that benefits all, that distribute economic growth to all the countries.
We're all pleased to see a Phase 1 agreement, but that's not the end of tensions in trade and technology and different areas of international competition. How much will this affect China's trajectory towards China 2049?
That's a challenge because the international environment has changed a lot. That's also because China's position in the world system has been fundamentally changed. I mean, in the past, China was just a follower, right? So we tried to get into the international system, follow the rule, then we benefited from the current system. But now things have changed. I think it's imperative for China to realize things have changed. China has to show a new face to the world. That is, China is no longer a rule follower. Now it has to become a rule maker. Right? To become a rule maker requires a lot of commitment. Right? Now you have to take into account other countries' interests, not just your own interests. Okay. China now is in the transition toward that goal.
In the vision of this great rejuvenation or second centenary goal, what is China 2049?
By the government's goal, China will become a modernized and high-income country by that time, right? How to define that? My sense is that by that time, China is going to reach the per capita income of the high-income countries at that time. So by high-income countries, I always use OECD as an example. Not all OECD countries are rich countries, but most of them are. So by 2049, China will reach the average income of that group of countries, right? So this means China per capita income probably is going to be 50% or more of American per capita income. That also means China's overall size of GDP is going to be more than double American size of GDP.
Because the population is roughly 4 times the size, so right, that's a very simple calculation.
Right, exactly, right. So that's roughly the standard for the second centennial goal.
Given that standard of the GDP per capita being roughly 50% of what the U.S.'s will be at that time,
right,
do you see a distinction in terms of which industries in China will be more prominent at that time, roughly 30 years from now, than today? Will there be a redistribution in industrial sectors or service sectors, or even geographically? What kind of differences will you see?
Well, service is already the largest sector in China today. By that time, probably service is going to account for 70% of GDP. That's kind of the normal case for advanced economy. And then within industry, I think AI, automation, are just dominant. Another one probably is medicine. Pharmaceutical industry will have a large room of growth in China.
China modernization depends on whether China will have a stable international environment. If there was a Cold War between China and the United States or a hot war, then China's domestic modernization will be greatly affected. So to maintain a favorable international environment, you still continue to be China's leadership priority. That's why China has been willing to discuss, to negotiate with the United States, even facing very high pressure, domestic pressure, negotiation. This is the leadership, as I understand, is very, very determined to continue this way. Don't make it an enemy, particularly the United States. China can do, because really they always say, we have a lot of shared interest, common interest. As long as we can go that side, it's okay.
If China achieves its great rejuvenation by 2049, what economic implications would it have on other countries in the world?
Right, so I think success, real success would come from China being more innovative, as I've said, which means it'll be much more productive, it'll be wealthier. People's per capita income will go up very significantly. But in my view, it would also be more open. So what it would do is for its partners, it would be providing great market opportunities. So American and other firms can bring their good products, their goods and services to China. Chinese people can benefit from that. But then there'll be successful Chinese firms that are going global and that are benefiting. If you think about it, a lot of economics is very simple. If China's a closed economy, it's a pretty big economy, but there's a limit. So if you invent something in a closed economy, you exploit it in that limited area. If we have an open world system, then anything that Chinese firms or Chinese inventors come up with, they'll be exploiting it globally, which will always be 4 or 5 times bigger than the Chinese economy. Chinese economy is not going to end up being more than about 20 to 25% of the world economy. And so even though you're big, you benefit enormously from an open system where you can exploit your innovations globally.
In his New Year's speech, President Xi Jinping stressed that 2020 will be a year of milestone significance. Why? It is the advent of Xiaokang the moderately prosperous society. China's first centenary goal, the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party of China, is in 2021. This year, 2020, will see the complete victory in the alleviation of all absolute poverty. And then, looking to the future, 2020 will lay the foundation and set the benchmark for the next 3 decades as China seeks to fulfill its second centenary goal in 2049. There are many challenges, of course, including financial risk, controlling pollution, and international tensions. I highlight 2 challenges. 1, real SOE reform such that SOEs can improve productivity and private companies can compete fairly, especially with access to financing. And 2, China becoming an innovative society with risk-taking encouraged and access to information facilitated. Given a time span of 3 decades, China must be vigilant for black swans and gray rhinos, unexpected events, or problems hidden in plain sight. How to scenario plan for such exigencies? As for China's role in the world, China states that its great rejuvenation will benefit the world, securing peace and increasing prosperity. The world is watching. For the following weeks, we continue to explore China 2049. In the next episode, we discern the country's innovative development to be closer to China.